She was clearly a virtuous and devoted housewife. Yet under the pretense of meeting her best friend for coffee, she secretly rendezvoused with her young lover in a public restroom. What she did not realize was that her husband had already sensed her betrayal. Instead of confronting her, he hired a private investigator to conduct a secret surveillance. Before long, every detail of her affair was captured by a hidden camera. While Connie was still lost in reckless passion with her lover, she never imagined that a moment of desire would drag both their lives into an irreversible abyss. Connie was an elegant middle-aged woman who not only had a lively and adorable son, but also a successful husband. Their abundant wealth allowed them to purchase a luxurious villa in the suburbs and live a life others could only envy. However, a violent windstorm mercilessly shattered the warmth and tranquility of their days. One afternoon, after finishing her shopping in the city center, Connie found herself unable to hail a taxi because of the raging storm. With no other choice, she trudged slowly toward a bus stop, but the howling wind, like a reckless demon, suddenly knocked her straight into the arms of a handsome young man, and in that accidental encounter, the gears of fate quietly began to turn. When Connie stumbled over to sit on the steps, she was shocked to discover that her knee was already bleeding heavily. Anxious and flustered, she asked the man to help her flag down a taxi. Instead, he warmly invited her to come upstairs to his apartment to treat the wound before heading home, gesturing that it was just above them.
Hold on to something, don't blow away. I'm not an axe murderer, I promise.
Paul's witty charm and striking looks were like a mysterious spark, radiating an irresistible allure. Connie hesitated only for a moment before letting the taxi that had slowly pulled up in front of her drive away. Moments later, she hurriedly followed Paul into the building. She had no idea that this would become the most regrettable decision of her life. As soon as they stepped inside, they were surprised to find that the old elevator had conveniently stopped working. Connie briefly considered giving up on going upstairs, but Paul's urgent urging sounded almost like an irresistible spell, compelling her to drag her injured knee toward his apartment. After a brief conversation, Connie learned that Paul was a book dealer. Although his polite manners and articulate speech left a favorable impression, her guarded instincts did not relax in the slightest. When she went into the bathroom to clean her wound, she made sure to lock the door behind her. Yet just as Connie finished bandaging herself and prepared to leave, Paul persuaded her to stay with a cup of steaming coffee. But at this moment Connie was worried about her son who had just finished school, so she borrowed Paul's phone to call the nanny at home and check on the boy. Yet she had no idea that her graceful legs and mature charm had already stirred restless fantasies in the young and impulsive Paul. While Connie chatted freely on the phone, Paul suddenly pressed a piece of ice gently against her wound. The unexpected touch of his hand against her skin made her heart race like a startled deer. Flustered, she quickly prepared to leave. Just as Connie was about to turn away, Paul immediately offered to give her a book as a keepsake. He even deliberately pretended to keep a polite distance from her. When Connie took the book, Paul asked her to carefully read page 38.
It is the season for wine, roses, and drunken friends. Be happy for this moment.
This moment is your life.
His subtle teasing and indirect flirtation sent ripples through her heart. Yet in the end, she hurriedly fled from his side. After returning home, her husband showed deep concern when he learned about her injured knee.
He lived around there. He got me some Band-Aids and put me in a taxi.
Is it good looking?
He never imagined that the man she mentioned so casually would be like a stone thrown into a calm lake, forever changing his life. That night, still stirred by the encounter with Paul, Connie longed to find comfort and reassurance in her husband. But just as the couple began to sink into an intimate moment, their son's sudden call shattered the atmosphere like a bolt of lightning. The next day, driven by curiosity, Connie took out the book Paul had given her. The moment she opened it, a business card slipped quietly from between the pages. As she bent down to pick it up, she was startled to see Paul's contact information printed on it. Although she clearly understood his intentions, as she headed toward the city center she felt as if an invisible hand were guiding her, compelling her to take out the card. With a trembling heart, she softly dialed his number. When no one answered, a faint sense of disappointment drifted through her like a lonely autumn leaf. Just as she was about to hang up, Paul's voice suddenly came through the line. Though their conversation lasted only a few brief sentences, it made Connie feel shy and nervous, like a girl experiencing her first love.
Yeah, take a break. I'll make you some coffee.
Soon after, she arrived at his apartment with a mix of anticipation and anxiety. As Paul helped her remove her coat, he deliberately brushed his hand lightly against her skin. Seeing that she did not resist, his actions grew bolder. He gently took her hand and began reading Braille from her palm.
My mother makes me chicken. Her chicken makes me cough.
I wish that when she made it, she took the feathers off.
Paul's humor and charm felt like warm sunlight brushing against her heart, giving her a sensation she had never experienced before. Their subtle physical contact left her feeling both embarrassed and exhilarated. In the end, however, reason prevailed over desire. Afraid she would lose control of the emotions surging inside her, Connie once again fled the ambiguous atmosphere in panic. On the way home, she was overwhelmed with guilt. In an effort to ease that guilt, she bought her husband a new piece of clothing. When her husband saw her unexpected visit to his workplace, he was genuinely delighted. Because their marriage had always appeared loving and stable, he felt no suspicion whatsoever. Yet that evening, as Connie busied herself with household chores, her mind kept drifting back to the moments she had spent with Paul. Her husband stood beside her for quite some time without her even noticing. Paul's wit and magnetism clung to her thoughts like a powerful spell. A few days later, unable to suppress her emotions any longer, Connie used the excuse of delivering a gift to thank him and once again stepped into Paul's apartment. With romantic music playing softly in the background, Paul invited her to dance. His whispered words were like burning flames, igniting a passion she could hardly describe. But when the music suddenly skipped, the sharp sound jolted her awake from her daze like an alarm. Once again, she fled the apartment in a rush.
Forgot my coat.
Under Paul's relentless pursuit, the final barrier in Connie's heart was eventually shattered by the overwhelming tide of emotion. Paul's youthful energy and passion set her excitement ablaze like an uncontrollable fire. The flush on Connie's radiant face and her racing heartbeat vividly revealed a middle-aged woman's hunger for exhilaration. Yet while they indulged themselves in moments of pleasure, they had no idea that danger was quietly drawing near. In the days that followed, Connie frequently called Paul behind her husband's back and secretly arranged to meet him. Passion burned like a blazing fire, binding Connie and Paul together day after day. With endless creativity, Paul always managed to give Connie a different kind of thrill. He even boldly invited her to experience a new rush of excitement in a public restroom, and Connie sank deeper and deeper into his passion, unable to pull herself away. After finding fulfillment with Paul during the day, she repeatedly refused her husband's attempts at intimacy at night. This gradually made her husband sense that something was wrong. Connie believed she could control everything and continue her reckless happiness forever, until one day, while she and Paul were on a date at a restaurant, their intimate behavior in plain sight was witnessed by one of her husband's subordinates. Later, when her husband sternly reprimanded that subordinate for a mistake at work, he never expected that in a fit of anger the man would expose Connie's betrayal.
Why don't you take a look at your own fucking family, Ed? Take a goddamn look at that!
As her husband listened to the mocking words, it felt as though a bolt of thunder had struck him. All of Connie's recent unusual behavior replayed in his mind. He could hardly believe that his once devoted wife had betrayed him. Determined to confirm the truth, he resolutely hired a private investigator. At dinner, he pretended to be leaving on a business trip, hoping to lower Connie's guard. The next morning, while Connie fantasized about how she and Paul would indulge themselves that day, she had no idea that a family crisis was already closing in. As soon as her husband left the house, she eagerly took out a set of alluring lingerie. Filled with anticipation, as expected, Paul came up with another elaborate idea and took her to a movie theater. In the dim darkness, they shared a fiery encounter. Afterward, they stepped out of the theater, flushed with excitement. While they were still savoring the intense experience, they had no idea that every move had been captured by a hidden camera. The next day, when Connie once again headed eagerly to Paul's apartment, she unexpectedly ran into her best friend downstairs. Under her friend's enthusiastic invitation, Connie reluctantly joined them for a meal. As she anxiously searched for an excuse to leave and meet Paul, her friend began to recount a painful chapter of her own past.
Something would happen. Someone finds out or someone falls in love and it ends disastrously. And it's the one thing in my life I would undo if I could.
In that moment, Connie's heart filled with fear and tension. When she returned home, guilt over her betrayal overwhelmed her, and even while cooking her thoughts were tangled in chaos.
It's boiling, Mom!
Looking at the mess before her, she felt like a lone boat caught in a raging storm. After a painful internal struggle, Connie finally resolved to end things with Paul, but her distracted state nearly caused a traffic accident on the way. When she hurried to Paul's building, she was shocked to see him embracing another woman intimately. Ignoring the pouring rain, she rushed after them in fury. The sight of Paul's flirtatious behavior ignited her anger like a volcanic eruption. In full view of the public, she lost control and struck him in a burst of rage. Yet in the end, Paul's smooth words drew her back into the apartment. Faced with his overwhelming passion, Connie once again found herself unable to resist. The two of them surrendered to their emotions once more. Meanwhile, her husband had already received the photographs taken by the private investigator. As he looked at the images of his wife in another man's arms, it felt as though a crushing storm had struck his heart, leaving him devastated. He did not know how to face the future of their marriage. Lost and shaken, he went to confront Paul, yet in the moment he hesitated and turned downstairs. He narrowly missed his wife, who had just left in haste. He then climbed the stairs and arrived at Paul's apartment. When he revealed his identity, Paul showed no trace of nervousness and calmly poured him a drink. Paul had no idea that danger was quietly approaching.
So tell me, how did you meet my wife?
By accident. On the street.
You're him.
Seeing the young man's disheveled clothes and the rumpled bed sheets, the husband felt an overwhelming sense of humiliation. When he noticed the snow globe he had given his wife sitting inside Paul's apartment, his anger surged like a violent hurricane, making it hard for him to breathe. Overcome by emotion, he suddenly grabbed the snow globe and smashed it violently against Paul's head. Caught completely off guard, Paul was struck in a vital spot by the sudden blow. Blood poured down from his head like a breached dam, and he collapsed heavily onto the floor. Seeing that Paul had stopped breathing, the husband's legs went weak and he sank onto the bed in shock. He frantically threw away the blood-stained snow globe. After forcing himself to calm down, he quickly wiped away every trace that could link him to the scene and prepared to remove the body. At that very moment, however, he heard a voicemail notification from his wife.
I can't live like this. I'm so tired of lying and hurting my family.
Connie's message was like a flash of lightning in the dark, filling him with urgency. If only she had called earlier and spoken her heart, perhaps this tragedy might never have happened. But there was no time to dwell on regret. He swiftly deleted her message, washed away the bloodstains, and dragged the body into the trunk of his car. Once everything appeared flawlessly handled, he hurried into the bathroom and scrubbed himself clean. Then he went to the theater, pretending nothing had happened, and calmly watched his son's performance. Connie noticed the sweat on her husband's face and felt concerned. Yet she sensed nothing unusual. As they watched their son shine on stage, both of them smiled with what seemed like genuine happiness. For a fleeting moment, it felt as though time had rewound to the warm days when they were simply a loving family of three. Late that night, after Connie had fallen into a deep sleep, her husband quietly rose and, under the cover of darkness, disposed of the body at a remote dump. He believed his secret had been executed perfectly. But a week later, Paul's body was discovered. Following the clues, the police eventually came to question Connie. Their once peaceful life was suddenly shaken by a violent storm. When Connie learned of Paul's death, dizziness overtook her and grief surged like a tidal wave. Yet she forced herself to appear composed.
It was 4 weeks ago, actually. You got a parking ticket right in front of Martel's apartment.
Under the sharp questioning of the police, she felt intense fear and tension. She claimed she had only purchased books from Paul, trying to conceal their relationship. The officer's persistent inquiries pressed down on her like an invisible weight. Fearing that something might slip, her husband feigned irritation toward the police and skillfully cut off their questioning. With no concrete evidence, the police were forced to leave. Still, Paul's death weighed heavily on Connie, leaving her trembling and breathless. When her husband returned to the room, she could no longer contain her emotions and began to cry in silence. Meanwhile, he silently bore the pain of her betrayal and the terror of being exposed. The crushing pressure pushed him to the edge of human endurance. A few days later, when Connie took clothes to the dry cleaner, she found an envelope in her husband's coat. Curious, she opened it and was stunned to discover photographs of herself and Paul taken secretly. She could no longer ignore the possibility that her husband had killed him. Fear spread through her like a suffocating fog. Back home, she noticed the snow globe she had given Paul now sitting in their house. With the evidence laid bare, she became certain that her husband was involved in Paul's death. She looked at him in disbelief, and the anxiety in his eyes confirmed her suspicion. That night, Connie approached him slowly and trembling, confronting him with the truth.
Did you hurt him? You did, didn't you?
You tell me what you did. You fucked him over and over and over. You lied to me. I wouldn't feel it. I knew it from the very first day.
The husband's sharp words cut through the last illusions between them like a blade. No language could fully capture his devastation and rage.
I didn't want to kill him. I wanted to kill you.
Connie understood that their marriage had reached a point beyond repair. Later, As she flipped through a photo album filled with memories of happier times, she absent-mindedly picked up the snow globe, carefully unscrewing its base. She discovered a heartfelt message written by her husband and a photograph of their family inside. Seeing his grief, she felt a piercing pain of remorse. In that moment, she was overwhelmed by regret for her betrayal. To protect her husband, Connie burned the photographs without hesitation. As the flames rose, her thoughts drifted back to the day she first met Paul. If only she had refused his invitation. If only she had stopped that taxi. None of this would have happened. But life offers no rewinds and no second chances. No one knows whether her husband ultimately faced legal consequences. What is certain is that Connie's betrayal had already driven their lives into an irreversible abyss. Every choice in life is like a move on a chessboard. It may lead to triumph or complete ruin. That is why we must treat every decision with care, cherish the happiness before us, and never allow a moment of impulse to destroy a lifetime of stability.